Now for today's program. Eetta Prince Gibson is Moment's Israel editor and the former editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Report. In addition to Moment, she's a regular contributor to Foreign Policy, Haaretz, Time, and other prominent publications. Eetta has been on assignment around the world covering crisis and conflict and has received the Clarion Award, the National Religion Writers Award, the Search for Common Ground Award, and several Hour Awards. Before transitioning to journalism, Eetta worked as a clinical social worker and pursued postgraduate studies in the Harvard Medicine School system, where she specialized in psychosocial trauma. Today, in addition to her writing, Eetta is a member of the Dina Project for Recognition and Justice for Victims of October 7th. Amy E. Schwartz is Moment Magazine's opinion and books editor, as well as editor of the magazine's popular Ask the Rabbi section, and she's won first place in commentary from the Religion News Association. Before coming to Moment, Amy was a longtime editorial writer and op-ed columnist at the Washington Post, where she was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize in commentary. Amy is president of the Non-Denominational Jewish Studies Center in Washington, D.C., and is the editor of the book, Can Robots Be Jewish? And Other Pressing Questions of Modern Life. Please welcome Eetta Prince Gibson and Amy E. Schwartz.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for
Thank
turning
you.
out. And thank you, Eetta, for finding time to talk to us in the middle of, I was going to say war today. It's not so clear what we're in the middle of. We'll get to that in a moment. And I would also just want to say that everyone, all the staff at Moment asked me to please tell you we're thinking of you and wishing you the best.
Thank you. Thank you all.
So let's start with we were going to talk about exhaustion, but I think before we even do that, we have to layer on uncertainty. So is it over? And what's it like in this? What kind of uncertainty are you living in? What are you expecting?
I think the uncertainty is on so many levels that, it's all encompassing. I mean, first of all, on a very basic level, at some point this evening, and they may be doing it this moment, the IDF is supposed to be announcing the home command if schools are opening tomorrow. Colleges are still open. We go a much later school year. But also elementary and high schools have been closed, as have nurseries.
How long?
So about 12 days now.
Right.
So there's a lot of question about what's tomorrow going to look like. There's a question about how much do I believe in the ceasefire? How much do I believe Iran, as well as how much do I believe Israel? Trump reportedly told the planes to go back, which is also kind of interesting because they actually, I don't know how they land if they're loaded. I mean,
Hmm.
that's also kind of an interesting thing that we know nothing about. So on that level, am I going to go to bed tonight convinced that there will be no problem and we will get a good night's sleep for the first time in about 12 nights? The answer is no, I'm not convinced.
Hmm.
If anybody asked me, should I assume that I can actually go to bed and, not care about if I have to get up in the middle of the night, what I am wearing, I would say no, and make sure your shoes are nearby if you
Hmm.
have to run. So on that level, I don't know what tomorrow's going to look like. I don't know what the next 10 minutes are going to look like. We know we have a ceasefire, but we also know that ceasefires are very fragile. We don't know what Iran agreed to or why. The fact that Trump yelled at them may or may not be convincing.
Hmm.
So on that level, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what our lives are going to look like. I don't know what tomorrow's going to look like. As I told you in our prep, I really hope it's over because I haven't been to Pilates for 12 days. And, let's keep our priorities very clear about what really matters in the universe. No, but seriously, joking aside, are we returning to some semblance of a normal life? And if we do return to that semblance of normal life, are we going to feel safe?
Hmm. Two different
It
questions,
will
right?
it will take me a few days to believe that the ceasefire is in fact in place. I think that probably also a lot of us are just so, that's what I want, just so primed and so prepped and so anxious
Wound up.
that even, yeah, wound up that even if it is real, it'll take us time to figure it out.
Hmm.
The other level of what does it mean is, of course, we were supposed to be able to take out the nuclear on a very different level. We were supposed to take out both the nuclear facilities as well as the conventional weaponry. Did we?
Nobody knows, right? Yeah.
Why now? Why the ceasefire now? Not that I'm, in favor of wars, but do I know that these goals were reached? Do I know that they were reasonable?
Hmm.
To what extent did Israel say that regime change was a goal of the war? I never thought that was a reasonable goal, but was it a goal? In other words, did we win this, whatever this was? Are we already calling this the 12-day war? Which is what everybody was doing at some point when the ceasefire for about 10 minutes, it was the 12-day
Well,
war.
that's what Trump wanted. That's what he put in his Truth
Right,
Social. This has been a 12
right.
day. This has been the 12-day
And
war.
and then there
People
were a lot of,
jumped on it.
and then
Yeah.
there were a lot of comments about, yeah, it was double the 6-day war, inflation, that kind of stuff.
That's funny. Yeah.
Um, you
This
know,
this is like 12 hours ago, right? When the ceasefire was announced. Let's just help the American
right.
viewer
Yeah.
with the time frame here.
It's
Like for us,
about
it was
12
yesterday,
hours.
you know,
And then we had the attack in Beersheba, in the
after the
morning
ceasefire. Yeah.
after
And
the ceasefire,
more people died.
and
Yeah.
a nasty attack in the north, which luckily didn't hurt anybody, so it didn't make any noise. It
Mm.
landed in an open field, but they actually broke twice.
Hmm.
So we don't know. And the attack in Beersheba in the morning was, I mean, to the point where I said to my husband, "Oh, there was an attack," and he said, "Yeah, I know about Beersheba." It was no, we're talking another one. You kind of got to watch the news.
So yeah.
So that's where we're at. Do I believe it? I don't know. Another level of what does this mean? What does this mean for Gaza?
Mm.
Remember, the Gaza war is going on all the time.
Right.
Soldiers are
Right.
dying, Palestinians are dying.
Our
Um,
reservists are still people are this is one of the things I wanted to ask, and this isn't so much about, it's partly psychological, but not completely, is even before this war started, there was a lot of talk about sort of the exhaustion of the reservists and the population. This was why the
right,
Haredim draft issue became so prominent, because people just didn't feel like they had any more in the
right.
tank. They were going back 3 times, 4 times. So my first question, they were going to fight this war with what? Like how did they, is it a
With
different group of
soldiers who
people?
are not refusing to serve, but how long will
Yeah.
that go on?
Are these the same? It's
Um,
it's all it's Air Force, right? So maybe they're not exactly the
Not
same people who
only,
are in
no, no,
Gaza.
no,
No?
we the Air Force is Iran. I mean, we had
Yeah,
Mossad
I meant
people
for this
obviously
particular
on
war.
the
It's 12
ground.
days. Yeah.
On the ground, we had the Air Force. The Air Force are not the same people. I don't, and I don't think they were doing as many sorties as
Hmm.
as the ground forces. I
Hmm.
don't know.
So,
Don't forget though, we had 200, as it was reported, somewhere in the vicinity of 200 planes in the air. Not all of them, of course, are attack planes because the planes have to refuel.
hmm,
So some of them are refuel planes that fly with them, refuel, and then come back.
that's a
So
lot.
we
Yeah.
don't, yeah, but there were at some point as many as 200 planes in the air. How many of those are also doing sorties over Gaza? Probably a lot of them. I mean, I don't know how many pilots we have. I also don't know how many are trained, if there's a difference in training, for instance, for long distance versus short distance. This is really far
Hmm.
placed, fighter planes don't have tremendous capacity for distance.
Mm.
They're not Boeings. They're
Right.
not 767s, that have people sitting. they're small and they're supposed to be, well, small, but they're not, they have to be able to maneuver, and they're light
Yeah, one of the
relative
things I
to
read
the
about the American sortie, even though it was, we thought in terms of the B-57s or whatever they were, but I read that it actually involved 125 aircraft altogether with the refueling and the this and the that and the cloaking,
Yep.
and
And it depends where they
that's a
came
lot.
from. I mean, where did they
Yeah.
take off from? And
Okay,
don't
yeah.
forget, in that sense, Israel had, Trump didn't order it until we had full air control
Right. Right.
over Tehran, or over
Sure.
actually most of Iran. So, in order to have full air control, there must be stuff in the air all the time.
Right. Amazing.
This is my field, but it's
Yeah.
pretty, yeah.
And that would
But it's
continue.
it's
Yeah.
pretty, on the one hand, it's pretty amazing. On the other hand, and it's kind of Star Warsy, and it's really easy to get caught up in how amazing it is. I mean,
Hmm.
think about it. They're flying hundreds of miles. What is it, like 900 miles?
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. But on the other hand, it's dangerous. It's not Star Wars.
Hmm.
The Jedi aren't there, and
Right. No,
they're the
no
bad
invisible
guys and
force. So
all
yes,
those.
actually we got off it's impossible not to talk about this stuff, but let's go
Right.
back to Earth.
Exhaustion. Yeah.
And I want to go back to something you said about not knowing, how to prepare, what kind of a night's sleep to prepare for. And so have you all been sleeping in your clothes?
We do, the people who, some people are, as you know, there's
I
a,
mean, for
there's a
12
whole
days?
thing about, well, I would hope that during the day they change. But there are,
No,
we
but
don't, because we have a safe room in our house.
okay, yeah.
So I just have to go downstairs
So, but when
and,
you go to bed thinking you might have to get up, what's different?
well, first of all, like last night, twice there was that alarm that goes off, which then says, in the next few minutes, there's a siren that's going to go off. Make
Hmm.
sure you're close to your safe space.
Okay, so
Now, in
two steps.
theory, what I do, since our safe, so we have a split level, so it's 4 stairs and 3 stairs. Um, so in theory, I say, yeah, well, good night. If the siren goes off, then I'll get up and go. How long does it take to do less than 7 stairs? But you don't really go back to sleep. Somewhere along the line, it's, after an hour or so, you say, well, I guess it isn't going to hit here, and kind of turn over. But it's not good sleep. It didn't happen twice.
Mm, yeah,
And
that's not real
also
sleep.
just, yeah, it's not real sleep. And people who have to run to the to a shelter, like my son, who's in Tel Aviv and does not have a safe room or a shelter in his building, and sprints to the local shelter, which is, I don't know, 2 minutes.
Mm,
Um, yeah, he sleeps in pajamas and has his shoes right next to the bed,
hmm.
so that he can get out and move. He also, when he hears the alarm that goes on your phone, there's remember when you used to have that, like I guess it was, I don't know, I was a little kid, so I guess it was the late 50s or early 60s, when it would come over TV, this is a test, and it would just
Mm.
interrupt everything. We have that on our phones. It will interrupt whatever you have on your phone.
Even if it's
If
turned
you're
off?
in the mints, it'll still make noise at you.
Interesting.
Not as loud as if you have, I mean, if it's off, it's off, but
Right.
I don't think anybody's turning off their phones. The other thing, by the way, I mean, I know I'm off topic, but I think people are interested, is we have what we call on Shabbat the quiet station. There is a station that doesn't broadcast anything, but is on for religious people who don't want to hear radio.
In case of an alert.
Yeah,
Oh,
it'll
that's
go
so
over.
interesting. So you can turn on a silent channel for Shabbat.
Right. Yeah,
Uh,
we have a
and
silent
that's
channel, and it's on, and it'll over, and it'll come on, and that's how they know to move. If you observe Shabbat to that extent
Is that
that
a
you will
recent
not.
development? That's so interesting that that must have gone through some kind of process with the Orthodox rabbis to say this is
It's
how
been
we're going to do it.
years. It's
Huh.
been years. There's also a little interesting thing there, which is that, of course, the ultra Orthodox aren't supposed to be having smartphones,
Hmm.
but we won't. Yeah, we won't
Right,
get
right.
into that one. But
Don't
yeah,
ask
we have
me
to
about
say that's a whole nother story here.
that.
But we do have the silent phone, and we have this god awful alert sound, which
Yeah,
some
tell
people
us.
say, I don't know who invented this. I mean, it is the most god awful sound. Sirens are like sirens. They
Right.
sound like the sirens have always sounded ever since I've known them. When I came to Israel and I was a kid in 73, was the first time I heard sirens, and they sound the same. Um, but the alert that goes over your phone, somebody said it sounds like a rhinoceros scratching a blackboard with its hoof. Not
Ugh.
sure why it's a rhinoceros, but combined with heavy metal music, it is the worst sound you've ever heard.
I mean, that's the point, right?
I
Unignorable.
think that's the point. You really can't ignore it. It's not like they're playing, John Lennon's Imagine to you. And it does make you get up and
That's the
pay
actual
attention to it.
alarm, not the alert.
That's in 10 minutes, you will be told,
Oh, so that's the alert.
yeah. Um, and then maybe it'll hit you, the alarm will go off, or maybe it won't, because that's saying we don't know where it's coming from.
So you get that all the
Or,
time, this horrible sound. Like
mhm.
how, yeah, like a couple times a day or.
Depends how many times. Yesterday it was twice and then twice at night.
Yeah.
Um, I don't remember anymore. I mean, that's part of it is it's really interesting that people are saying that, it's been a year since last week. Because
Yeah,
our
yeah. That's
whole
for not
sense of
sleeping,
time,
right?
when you're
You
not
know?
sleeping or you're not sleeping properly and your schedules don't have sense. And anytime you want to do something, you kind of check if it's open, like, um, is the supermarket open? Which one is open? Because some of them are and some of them aren't.
Hmm.
Um, Coffee shops, well, if they're not supposed to be open. But in Jerusalem, everybody's decided, yeah, it's okay. Malls, the stores aren't supposed to be open, but the malls are open because they have major, huge shelters, and because the parking lots, the underground parking lots, double as shelters.
Oh, that's interesting. Huh. So
So
congregate?
malls are open, but then of course the stores said that's ridiculous and opened. But you really don't, the sense of I don't know is this store open. Not that these are crucial. I guess what I'm learning also is how routine dependent we are, how much we always think that, like, well, if I run out of milk, is the grocery store open, or do I have to go to the supermarket? Because we still have little mama papa grocery stores near our homes.
Mm.
So, or is it the supermarket, which is further? All these small things. On the other hand, stores are stocked.
Hmm.
There's everything we need. It's not like we're living in any kind of I mean, it's not the Blitz where things weren't available. Things are available, including luxury items. Deliveries are being made. I would
Interesting.
assume Walt and, Uber and all those things are working. I feel bad. Of course, who's doing deliveries?
Mm.
Supermarkets deliver here. So, who do we think is doing deliveries? Poor people who need the money,
Oh, you mean
or
and they're out,
students.
they're more
And
exposed.
more of them are
Yeah.
Arabs, of course. And then why am I having the stuff delivered? Because I don't want to go out. Now,
Hmm.
tomorrow that may all be different. I
Hmm.
don't know. I
Maybe.
have no idea.
So just to go back a little, how much of this had gone back to normal after the prolonged period after October 7th? When, I mean, that was also that was a different that wasn't a home front war in the same way, right?
Well, October 7th, no, October 7th for the public that wasn't affected directly. In other words, that wasn't, their homes or the kibbutzim or the north. It took a few days till we knew what was going on, till we knew things were safe. It did take days until we knew if there weren't individual Hamas terrorists hanging out.
Right, till
You
you'd
know, they
clear.
could
Yeah.
have been discovered somewhere else, and everything was canceled. That, if I remember, although it's really interesting but also sad how you don't remember, because all of these things kind of converge because we've gone through so many of them. I think it was about a week.
Mm,
And then there was a moment of, well, life is back to normal, but how can it be? So yeah, you'd go to, we're very European in that sense. You know, we do coffee shops, and very much, you know, you sit at coffee shops, people work at coffee shops, people sit there, have business meetings. Um, you know, it isn't done, as the Brits would say. And that went on for a very long time.
right.
Um,
Sort
that
of a
was
bereavement thing, just not.
it was not okay. People, you know, at some point we didn't know how many people were kidnapped.
Hmm.
We didn't know how many people were dead. If some of our listeners may remember that the numbers were initially much larger because we couldn't tell apart who were terrorists who were killed
Yeah.
and who
So,
were civilians. So that went on for a while. Is it did we go back to normal? I don't think so. I think we've been on non-normal for so long that it's
different.
hard to remember what normal feels like.
uh,
In
yeah.
that or what is normal. I think that our sense of security has been so badly broken. You know, if the meaning of the state of Israel is that the Jews will never be as unsafe and as exposed
Hmm.
and have no defense as we were. The fact that they broke through this high-techy wall, and there we are in high-techy again. You know,
Mm.
we love high tech, but there's a problem, and I think that's something we might want to talk about in terms of, you know, the long-term effects, and getting in love with high tech.
Mm.
And you know, Space Wars, Star Wars, and it's also cool. And for those of us of certain ages, we grew up with that. You know, it's also neat and it's also cool, but they broke through the wall. They broke through the most high tech barrier in the world, and
Right.
that I don't think we feel safe
Mm.
still.
Interesting. Even watching all these, yeah. Well, so these are, so I mean, and I've heard this. We've talked about this before. There's, if you look back over the last 2 years, you're talking about all these sort of overlapping traumas, right? So let's talk about coping. I mean, um, we started this by, I mean, we talked about tears and laughter, like Israelis, the famous Israeli coping. Tell us how you cope.
Well, you know, I mean, I think that there's several layers of that, and I think sometimes I'm even angry about it. We put on a good face, but you know, we're human and we're pretty broken
Mm-hmm.
and we're pretty upset and we're pretty broken and pretty traumatized, and the fact that some of our basic assumptions have been destroyed is something that we are not ready to talk about, maybe, but it's there. So the fact that we look normal doesn't mean that we are. And that's of concern to me. I mean, what's happening to kids?
Mm-hmm.
What are we reading? What movies? You know, my daughter told me that, and she lives in Jerusalem, that her son, who is 16 months, when the sirens go off and she runs to pick him up, she can see that he's already put together that the siren is a bad noise.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that
And he's how old? He's, yeah.
there's a conditioning at a very young age. Now, that may go away.
Right. Of course, that's what a
for
siren
health.
is for, right? Everyone, by the time you're an adult, you need to be completely conditioned that a siren is a bad thing. So,
Yeah, exactly. But do you really want 16-month-olds who've just learned to walk and kind of,
right, of course
make
not. Yeah.
sounds like Googa, to recognize that there's a different way of being picked up?
Mm,
That
yeah,
sometimes
no.
you're picked up fun and sometimes you're picked up, go,
Yeah.
run.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and they try not to panic. He doesn't like the shelter. He knows when he's going to the shelter, he can already tell the difference between obviously our house when he comes to visit, Saba and Savta, grandma and grandpa, and between when he goes to his daycare and when he goes to a shelter, he can
Mm,
tell that they're different places.
yeah.
So, when you say resilient, how are we coping? One level is I think we look a lot better than we are.
Hmm.
That's number one.
Right.
I have to say that the state has provided a lot of structures that work. We have an entire infrastructure of safe places, in since the 90s, since the first Gulf War, we have safe rooms, these
Hmm.
safe rooms that are
Required
part
by
of
law,
the
right?
house. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
by law. New buildings build shelters. There are neighborhood shelters. We have a safe room, but in the neighborhood there's a shelter. But most people prefer the school which isn't in school. There's a school in the neighborhood. The school that isn't open for school is open because it's got a huge shelter that's big
Mm.
enough for all of the kids in the school to be down in the shelter, and it's open.
So the neighborhood uses that.
Yeah, so
Oh,
people who don't have shelters, we have public shelters. Hospitals move their stuff down underground.
right.
So there are operating theaters, delivery rooms, labs, everything's working.
That was one of the
It's only,
craziest aspects of the coverage from the beginning was that the hospitals had just moved everything underground.
yeah. Well, they move them underground because they're used to doing it.
Mm.
They also practice it.
Yeah.
The stuff is down there. It takes a few hours and you're done. Obviously, it's only non-essential surgery is not being done in a
Hmm.
case like this. Essential surgery is dialysis, cancer treatments, chemos, all those things are being done.
Yeah.
So we also have a medical structure. We have this structure of safe places that's
Mm.
all very mapped out. However, I want to say house coping. Coping is also a function of social equality.
I was going to
It depends.
say, yeah.
It depends who you are, and I wrote that in the piece that was in Moment last week. The Arab towns do not have the same number of shelters because they don't get building permits.
Mm.
So newer buildings have all these fancy things, but they don't get building permits, which is a form of discrimination.
So the housing stock is all pre-war in that sense.
Hmm.
So they don't have.
Like my son who lives in Tel Aviv, as I said, lives in an old building. It's
Mm.
cool. It's in a, hipster part of town, but it's an old building.
So
Um,
yeah.
and
Huh.
so yeah, but the standards, the legal standards are upheld in Jewish settlements.
Mm.
Sadly, they're not upheld in Arab ostensibly because they haven't built new homes, but they haven't built new homes because they
Because
don't get building permits, which is an issue of discrimination. Poorer towns don't have the same standards. They have the same in legal national standards, but they don't build them as well.
yeah.
Some of the building is not as strong in poorer towns, poorer neighborhoods.
Are we seeing that in the casualty patterns? I mean, I
Sure,
don't.
Batyam, where
John
buildings
was older.
crashed.
Mm.
Yeah,
Wow. And in the.
and also, they may not have been built to spec, all that kind of stuff. We don't know. The worst, of course, are the Bedouin, who have nothing, and are out there just praying.
Yeah, I read
Um,
somewhere they were did you write this that they were actually digging holes in the sand in the
no,
ground?
I didn't write that,
I
but
did read that
yes, that
somewhere.
is
Yeah,
true.
out of
And they're
desperation.
also trying to use pipes, and those big round things like but they're not real. I mean, that's not real. And again, it's a form of discrimination without going into all of the details. But I think that while we have a great system, what we're certainly seeing and how we're coping is that the system also, like in crisis, brings up social inequalities, it brings up racism. There have been incidents of people not allowing, in some cases, strangers, in some cases, Arabs,
Hmm.
in some cases, foreign workers, to enter their shelters. That happens to be illegal,
Mm.
but like, so what? On the other hand, you have it also, just like any crisis, brings up the best.
Hmm.
Yes, we have racism. We also have people running around, making sure that the person who lives up on the fifth floor. I mean, one of the important things, and it's a job that people take upon themselves, is who closes the door to the shelter.
Oh, interesting. Is that a
Because you got to close the door to the shelter,
and
right?
is that
Well,
dangerous?
how do you know that everybody's in the shelter?
Oh, huh.
So there is always, in every shelter, there's somebody who makes it their job to make sure that the old lady on the 50th floor actually went down in the elevator. And we're waiting for, Shoshana, who's coming
Wow.
down.
Yeah.
So as I said, what you're seeing is some of the best. You're seeing people. Yesterday I was driving back and a woman asked me to stop. She was crossing the street, not at a stop walk, and it was kind of a funny. And I stopped, and she came up to me, and I said, "Do you need something?" Or you know, and she said, "Would you drive me to the end of the road? It's a long road. I just came out of the shelter, and I'm tired." I would have taken her anyway, but I mean, but it was interesting that she felt she could do that.
Yeah, for
Um,
years, I believe Israel was one of the only countries people still felt safe hitchhiking in.
oh yeah.
Yeah, I
Oh
don't know
yeah,
if that's still
when
true.
I was in the army, we hitchhiked.
Yeah,
I
maybe
mean, there
not
were a
so
lot
true.
of jokes about asking, um, my my husband says after the war in the Yom Kippur War, he months later had vacation in Eilat, which is of course in very far south,
Hmm.
and was going to Haifa, which is pretty far north. And he asked the guy who stops, "Where are you going?" And the guy says, "To Haifa." Well, rides were so everybody was stopping for soldiers. He said, "Where in Haifa?" I only get on if you're actually taking me to my neighborhood. I don't get on just to go up to, it's like,
That's funny.
where in Brooklyn are you taking me?
Right.
Um,
Right.
so yes, but it's not safe now. We are a very different society. We're also, over 9 million people.
Yeah,
That's
not a
legal.
neighborhood anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the cute little, Slolik, the guy with, sorry we won, that kind
Yeah.
of cartoon with the dumb Kova Tembel, the dumb
I have
hat.
that book. Yeah.
Yeah, we all had that. But so to go back, that's another way of coping, is
Mhm.
the whole system, the medical system that works.
Yeah.
If you are in need of a medical emergency, including a pediatric, not so emergency, but your kid spiked a fever, he has a rash you don't like, whatever, you will get treated.
Hmm.
The system works. A lot of it works hybrid. You get on the computer and talk to your doctor.
Hmm.
We also have, of course, and that's what parking lots, where the municipality in Tel Aviv put out the tents in the parking lots so that people would be able to kind of sleep in tents.
So you mean
And
in the underground parking garages?
yeah, they
You
have
go in a
campers.
giant shelter and you have a tent. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
That's
tons
a
I mean, dozens and dozens of rows of
huh.
two-person camper tents. The kind you set up with those little pulley things,
Mhm.
that are very cute.
So
Um,
a little
and
privacy.
then I guess there's there's all sorts of things that work that we don't even think about because we just kind of assume
Mhm.
that it's supposed to be. The radio goes into, unfortunately, most of the time, the radio goes into 24-hour talk
Right.
news,
News. Yeah.
and talk shows and repeat themselves endlessly. But there's lots and lots of advice how to handle your kids.
Hmm.
Yeah, let your kids watch screens. No, no, don't let your kids watch screens. Treat yourself nicely. But don't eat too many sweets. Nah, treat yourself and have a sweet. There's a lot of this kind of advice. You'll suddenly, in the middle of a news station on a news program on public radio, deep breathing. I thought that was pretty cute.
Oh, stop everyone and breathe. That's funny.
Everybody stop and she's
Huh,
a great,
interesting. Huh. Well, and
she's
and and of course they keep telling you to keep routines, right, for the kids, and it's the one thing you can't do.
which you can't do.
Right.
And then we have humor,
I was gonna
which
ask you, I want to hear about the jokes.
yeah.
Apparently you guys have some great jokes.
Well,
So,
the first one is that the Iranians, we heard Iranian jokes. We don't know if they're really saying that, but the Iranians are saying, why agree to a ceasefire when if we leave the Israelis for another week with their kids and no frameworks, oh, they'll all just give in and convert to Islam or something.
just keep the school
Um,
shut.
just
That's
give it,
funny.
please. Please. Or how come everybody knows? How come nobody knows in Iran where the leaders are except the Mossad?
Yeah. Well, these
Like,
are, yeah. But what about, yeah, but jokes, those are
but
jokes on,
ours are, first of all, some of them are just observations. Like, how come we knew where all the leaders of Iran were, but we couldn't, but the post office can't find my parcel and
right?
can't get a letter delivered.
Yeah.
We also have who's the idiot that said that the way we know we can leave the safe rooms, but especially the shelters, is that they will tell us on our phones when lots of the shelters don't have Wi-Fi.
Right.
So the way that you know if you can leave the shelter is you send a canary, meaning some person who's willing to do this, out to look on their phone to go back in to say, yeah, it's okay, you can come out now, or no, you can't come out now.
Sounds like Noah's
Um,
Ark.
and then, and then, of course, there's lots of anecdotes about dogs and cats, and people. Yes, people do bring their pets.
Into the
So the
shelter.
dogs, it's a thing. Dogs that don't get along, dogs and cats and fish. People bring their goldfish. Fish at well, if hey, if your house is destroyed, you might want to
True.
save your goldfish,
You're a certain
your
age.
parakeets.
You're in
So
the
they come
shelter.
down and the cats start going crazy for the birds.
Right.
We also have things about what would you bring with you
In a shelter.
um, into the shelters. So of course the high tech brings a router. The hipster brings his what's it called? The macchinato, the thing for
Coffee
coffee.
machine. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Latte.
with a little burner
Mm-hmm.
and the thingy that makes whipped milk,
Has
the
that actually
frother,
been spotted or it's just a meme?
so that
Uh-huh.
they can they can have. And
Right.
of course then you have the boomer old hippies who bring down their, especially Americans who've been here for like 40, 50 years, but bring down their guitars, ukuleles, and banjos and think we should have a hootenanny. There's the there's the businessman who never forgets to bring down his business cards.
Oh, that's funny.
Including the guy from he'll fix your car. And if it gets scratched, I also do body work.
So this is a typography of basic Israeli type.
Yeah,
You said there was, yeah.
the cosmetician who brings down samples.
Mm-hmm.
The newlyweds, we don't have to say a lot more about that. especially if it's in the middle of the night. People who are live streaming and then get totally freaked out that they don't have Wi-Fi.
Hmm.
Then there's always in every shelter, there's some philosopher type who sits in the corner by himself, kind of, you can imagine him reading Nietzsche or something like that. And every so often he'll go, "Hmm." And you
Meaning
just kind of,
what? Just lost in contemplation.
you know, um, and then there's somebody who self-appoints themselves as an expert. So they will say,
Ah,
no, that wasn't a boom. That
oh,
was, now you understand that they're sitting in a shelter where they have no access to anything. So they're explaining to you in law, it's live commentary of what they couldn't possibly know.
huh.
No, 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 that wasn't a bomb. That was a boom. No, that was just a car. Don't be silly. And then, of course, there are grandmothers who bring down either food in Tupperware, which they've obviously packed ahead of time, or they bring down these huge pots. I'm not kidding. They bring down pots, especially the Mizrahi, the women from Arab countries who feel very bad from the people from Western countries because they don't have as good food, in their opinion. So they will bring down, things you can munch on.
Mm-hmm.
Like kube or stuffed grape leaves or things like that. So you could be sitting there eating a gourmet meal. It's kind of bizarre. And these are and then of course there's the grandmothers who will dispense free advice on how you should be treating the baby that somebody else had to bring down, whether you wanted their advice or not. They are very, very happy to advise you on how to do that. And
So
then
are these, yeah, go
and
ahead.
there's of course the kids who bring down either their phones and then it fits if they can't get reception, or they bring down Catan, that game that they're
Hmm.
all,
Settlers of
that they're all,
Catan, yeah. My kids have it.
yeah, Catan, I don't know, whatever it's called. They play that when they might be in there for as long as 10 minutes, but they wouldn't want to stop. And then there's all the what to wear, what the well-dressed person wears to a shelter. You don't want to wear a negligee, but you really don't want them to see, you're gonna sleep in sweats,
Well, we went, yeah, we talked about that a little bit.
and
So,
it's hot out.
right, right. How long are these shelter? I mean, you started by saying it used to be short periods in the shelter, like 10 minutes. Now what's the longest people have been stuck in these situations?
Yesterday was probably the longest. It was 55 minutes.
So we're not talking about spending the night in the shelter,
No, but people are going down for the night
just so they
because
won't have
they
to.
don't want to run. People have fallen. People have hurt themselves, not in the shelter, but running. If you're running and you're tired or you're elderly or you're
Mhm.
running with a baby, it's not safe and it might be dark. And the shelters are not in the middle of the street. They're usually in public gardens or something. They may not be lit properly.
Mhm.
So all of that, there are a lot of people who are choosing to sleep in shelters. My bet would be that a lot of them, no matter what they announced half an hour ago, if they announced half an hour ago,
Sure.
um, and we can, somebody might want to check the news, um, is that a lot of people sleep in shelters. Anyway, there are people sleeping in safe and just, why do I have to get up? The safe
Mhm.
room usually in your apartment usually serves as a bedroom or a workroom anyway.
Mhm. Or for the
It's a
kids,
real
right?
room.
Yeah.
So, it's often an issue of which kid got screwed and got the smaller icky room. But on the other hand, now they're riding high because everybody wants to be in their room and they're
That's funny.
they're
I
running the
yeah.
show.
And I read
So
people,
there's a
yeah.
we're handling it. I'm sorry, we're just handling it with a lot of this, and every time somebody will, come up with quips, some quip.
Right.
But behind
Cranky
it,
but
it's not
game.
funny, and we all know
Yeah.
it's not funny. That's one way to handle it.
Right, right.
Um, Another way to handle it, and I think that, or to cope, which I think is important, is that people are very much trying to be kind. There's this serious talk, serious, um, like our synagogue puts out every morning, be kind to each other,
Mhm.
there's all this stuff. My synagogue was running a Feldenkrais program earlier
Oh,
this evening.
that's the thing where you
Um,
stand on your head?
yeah, free Feldenkrais.
Yeah.
But I think that, inviting people over so that you can share. And then if you have to go down into a safe room
Hmm.
or into a shelter, where whatever house, people will say,
We're all
well, let's do
together.
it at
Yeah.
my house
Well, that's
rather
nice.
than your house because I have a shelter.
I read
And
there's
it's
been a lot of intergenerational people moving back in
yeah.
with their
And
parents.
then there's a lot of kids who've moved home. Yeah.
So
A
that's
lot
kind
of
of
talk about, oh, I didn't know my kids were moving in. I kind of got used to being on my own a little with my husband, kind of enjoying it a little. But I think that a lot of recognition, at least I'll speak for myself and some of my friends, you know, we're hearing so much, as I've said several times, about the high techy stuff. And we're hearing so many men who are with their male army voices talking about, this deep, and that we did attack and we didn't attack. And then it took this much and the equipment and it took that much equipment and we achieved this. And it's all so army and militaristic. And there's something that many of us are trying to hold on to, like thinking about inequality, as
Mhm.
we mentioned.
Yeah, right.
And I don't think it's by chance that it's mostly women who are writing about that and looking at that and not getting caught up in how cool and Star Warsies this
Hmm.
is,
Huh.
how well, like, you can get into it. It's cool. It's fun.
Yeah,
If
although the
if
men
that's
are
what you
also, to be fair, the men are also doing more of the soldiering, aren't they? I mean, they're under
Yes,
a lot of
yes.
stress.
Although there were female pilots.
Yes. Oh, that's
There
interesting.
were absolutely female pilots, including fighter pilots, that the Army made sure that we know.
That's good.
And the statement now of using both the male and the female forms, as opposed to assuming that the male plural. So in the past we would
Pilot
say, the tayasim, which is the male plural,
of
to
pilot.
cover both men and male and female, will now say hatayasim vatayasot.
Oh,
The
interesting.
male, yeah, that's coming in real strong.
Hmm.
But a lot of sense of, is this, how can we make this better? We can't help the Palestinians a lot. We can't help the Iranians a lot, but we can try to say that what we want to do is make our own lives at least kinder,
Hmm.
more compassionate. Can we look at other ways of thinking besides military? Because it's just so easy to be caught up in this. And that is something that I think, if you ask about coping, matters a lot to me. I check in, people check in on me. Our WhatsApps work. I think I'm supposed
Oh,
to say in English WhatsApp, right? But they work all the time. I mean, first of all, of course, when something goes off and you get out of the shelter, the family WhatsApp and all of that goes, and you call everybody. And if you heard it was in Haifa, we call our in-laws and all of that. But also just checking in. Are you okay?
mm,
I'm feeling, somebody posting on my book club WhatsApp. I'm
yeah.
feeling lonely today. Well, do you want me to come over? Um,
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, this is a note. I'm not saying to end on, but I think at least I'm going to turn you over to Suzanne because I think some of our listeners have questions and they're good. That's always,
it's a good question.
people
Right. Yeah,
want to
I see
talk.
questions. Yeah.
But I mean, I'm happy to let's say, if in fact all this terrible war and suffering can turn people even for a little bit to their kinder angels, their better natures, then that's something that's a nice takeaway, at least for
If
today.
we can. I mean, the
If
only
we
thing I
can.
would add, Suzanne, if I may, is we brought up slowly or before, we're exhausted. The Israeli public is exhausted, not just from these 12 days. Those of us who are also on the left have been demonstrating.
Hmm.
Okay, 12 days we haven't demonstrated. But we've been demonstrating since January 2024. It's an awfully long time, and most of us were demonstrating I'm sorry, January 2023,
Yeah,
when the judicial override started.
sure.
And so we are exhausted. I only hope that we can also assess, if we want to end on a more positive note, there is an opportunity perhaps for some geopolitical realignment in the Mideast. Will we be alert enough,
This is
and
it.
competent enough to grasp it
Uh,
and to see it? Because I don't know that we're beginning to think this is normal.
huh.
I sometimes I say, do I really live like this? And I think, haha. And I tell a joke, and if I say it to non-Israelis, people look at me like, you think that's funny? And yeah, but will we be alert enough, and can we count in this sense on our listeners, but in general, the world, to help us to grasp opportunities as they come up and not sink down? Because yeah, we're resilient when we're sabers and all that kind of stuff. We're also human beings who are really tired, and we need your help.
All right. Thank you. Let me pass you on back
Yeah.
to Suzanne. Thank you for talking to us, Ida,
Thank you
for
for
everyone,
having
for
me.
the
I
energy,
hope I
for the energy.
gave a picture.
All right.
Thank,
Onward.
thank, thank you both. And Ita, I mean, I remember when I emailed you a few days ago, and my opening sentence was, it seems a little weird asking, how are you? Like, it just seems, of course, you're not okay, but your response to me, I mean, do you want to share how you responded? That we should be asking, how are you doing?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, to remind us that it's not okay and it's not normal. But also to know that you have our back, not just in the, will Trump join the fray, and will this one fight, and will France do this and Germany that? But will you help us to stay human and kind and compassionate, alert, politically sharp, so that we can take advantage of things? Will you challenge us when we start to sink down a little bit? We may not be as creative as we were 3 years ago. We're really tired. So asking how you are is something that makes me think. I mean, I can often send out a quip, you know, my skin looks awful because I haven't been able to do a mask for weeks because I didn't want to get caught.
Actually, you look great, Ida. I just want to say.
Thank you. But no, but more seriously, what your question does is make me think, um, yeah, am I thinking okay? Have I asked anybody today how they are?
Mm.
Um, have I checked on my older neighbor? Have I made a meal and taken care of myself? Those kinds of things really matter. And I think that the American Jewish community should never, uh, think that, or what's what I want, not think how important that is, and
Mhm,
how valuable that is to us, and how much it matters to us.
mhm. Thank you. Somebody said religious figures after the 1948 UN recognition of Israel, reflecting that the US President Truman was given life for the sole purpose to facilitate this modern day miracle. Will Trump be similarly regarded for the US military support given to protect Israel, if not Jews worldwide?
Probably by some. I mean, I'm sure there are Jews who will see that. There are Jews who've already, who were pro-Trump even before. If you remember, that was when Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem. There was this wow. Um, there are religious Jews here. I think that's more of an American phenomenon than an Israeli phenomenon. But again, people are remembered in retrospect, in a much broader perspective. And
Mhm.
that will be something that Americans, as Americans, not only as American Jews, will decide. And we also don't know where he's going. The man is a little bit labile and does kind of flip sometimes. So
Mhm.
Let's save our blessings for next week.
Somebody just wanted us to let everybody know that there is an organization called Standing Together that's been
Yes.
raising money to provide bomb shelters to the Bedouin communities. So people can check
Yes.
that out. It's Standing
Standing
Dash
Together,
Together.
I didn't want to be political. Standing Together is a movement of Israeli Jews and Israeli Palestinians, citizens of the country, that does a lot of work. And yes, they are raising money. I don't remember their website. There are also other groups, but you can find Standing Together. And there are also lots of other initiatives. There's also food banks, and other things like that, including taking people to hospitals and lots
Mhm.
of things.
You said that you live in Jerusalem and your son lives in Tel Aviv. From all the news reports we've been seeing, the bombs that have gotten through have not gotten through to Jerusalem. Do you feel like there is a little bit different feeling between those who live in Jerusalem and the rest of the country? Maybe a little how they're dealing with
Well,
things?
first of all, there's a serious competition between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. It's a little bit of like in Boston, they talk about town and gown. And there's also kind of the New York, Boston, Washington thing. So, they love to say how much Tel Aviv is so cool and it has a beach. And, we like to say it's boring. And Jerusalem's a lot more interesting. But yes, I think we've become more cavalier. I think there's a little bit of, again, on a joking level of the Schadenfreude, ha ha. You didn't want to stay in boring Jerusalem, ha ha. Well, we're safer. We don't know that, but of course, would you want to? I live about a mile from the Haram al Sharif, the noble sanctuary, which is the Temple Mount, of course, and the wall. I use the Arabic because would you want to be the Muslim that blew up the Al-Aqsa Mosque? I wouldn't want to do that. So, we have a little bit of a feeling, since the stuff isn't, the things they're sending over aren't that precise. They can't lock in. I mean, that close, as far as we know. We do have a sense, and I think that Jerusalem is safer, certainly closer to the old city, but Jerusalem isn't that huge. On the outskirts of Jerusalem, west of the city, east is a different story. They did hit the West Bank by mistake, by the way, and people in the West Bank were seriously hurt. But I think that we do have a sense that we're a little safer, a little bit more cavalier, maybe. But many of us, but it's a small country. It's, like I said, it's my son. So, there's immediately are you okay? But yesterday he sent me, when the thing went off, don't be such a boomer. Get yourself into a shelter, because I was on the road. And kind of like in COVID, remember when the kids were taking care of their parents? There is a difference between the two cities, though, yes. And
Mhm.
Jerusalem
And
is statistically safer.
and economically, how is Israel going to fare financially with all of the rebuilding that's going to need to take place?
Well, interestingly, we're going to make a difference, as I think only economists can do, between the economy and people's economic lives. In fact, the removal of the threat of Iran is actually going to serve the Israeli economy well. Our standing will probably go up, and things like, I don't know, Standard and Poor and all those kinds of things that, economists follow. A lot of people are suffering, though, very badly. Prices are going up. Independent businesses are having a lot of trouble. Don't forget, people in the north and in the south have had many of their businesses destroyed. In the north, people aren't home yet. Right now, over 11,000 people have been displaced in this war in 12 days. It's over 11,000, and that's before the sum total. Not all buildings have been checked. The buildings that are destroyed, we know. Let's just find out now what's structurally stable and how long it takes to. So we're going to make a distinction between the economy and people. The economy will probably do well. The shekel is extremely strong. It's doing well against other currencies, including the dollar. But I know that I'm finding shopping outrageously expensive. People are not going to, even before these 12 days, going to restaurants. I'm talking about the middle class, which usually bears the brunt. Gas went up. So yeah, we're going to pay for this.
And as we wrap up, I just two quick questions. One, something we have not discussed at all is the hostages. Where are things? Where are the families, people talking about it, demonstrating? Where do things stand?
Nowhere. There's I'm actually writing on this. There's a real question about why Bibi does or does not want the hostages to come back. I think the reason is political. I don't think they're 50 now. They brought back more dead, but I think that as somebody pointed out, if we can pinpoint, a facility in Iran which is slightly larger than the Gaza Strip, how come we can't find the hostages in the Gaza Strip? It's a matter of political will, and yes, the families and those of us who believe that returning the hostages is not only a humanitarian thing, but it's what a country owes its soldiers. It's part of our social contract. It's do we care for our people? And are very concerned that this is going to push it aside, and now we're all going to get certainly it did on the news, although there have been people who brought it up all the time. The families who have an organization called the families of hostages or something, have been putting out statements every day. The demonstrations will start again. I'm already making plans for Saturday night, that we're all going to go out and demonstrate. And yes, I think that returning the hostages is a matter of the families and the specific 50 people who are there. But it's an issue for Israeli society, and I'm very concerned.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't bring it up because we weren't there, but it's certainly there.
Right. Just want to make sure that we touched on it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, because I wouldn't want to ignore them.
Yeah. And as we wrap up, for us who are watching on Instagram and social media, there's been a lot of posts of folks in the shelters when particularly the large shelters over Shabbat, still having services, a lot of singing and dancing.
Oh, yeah.
And it's interesting watching the comments, because clearly there are some trolls on there who are saying how sick it is that Israelis are singing and dancing. But for Israelis, it's a whole different ballgame. Do you want to comment on that? Because I think it gives a lot of Jews around the world hope seeing that.
I think what we have to do, and trolls and that kind of stuff seem unable to hold on to two contradictory thoughts at the same time. There's a lot of very contradictory things going on at the same time, and you have to be able to hold on to them. The situation in Gaza is appalling. This is a political issue, if you want to say they deserve it, whatever. But people are dying and starving. Does it do them better that I would sit and starve with them? I mean, can I hold on to the fact that I will take care of myself and also be concerned for the other, whoever that other is? We also haven't talked a lot about innocent Iranians who've died, and I'm sure there are many. So that, yeah, but does that make it wrong? Does that mean that I'm not concerned about what my country is doing? And again, I'm revealing my own political positions, but anybody who reads me in Moment knows my political positions in the op-eds. It's a matter of holding on to all of it. It's all true. And ignoring one doesn't make the other less true or more true.
Mm-hmm. But what I was also getting to is that the pride, even though you're in the bomb shelter, people are still having services. They're still singing. They're still being joyful.
Don't forget, Israeli chutzpah is a real thing. There's also a little bit of, can be said in 4 letters, but will be Nice. You know, there's a little bit of I'm going to show you. You know, you're not going to do it to me. No way. Yeah, sometimes the banjos and the guitars are a little much, but sometimes there's singing. You know, we have public sing-alongs, rounds, people do rounds. Um, the hipsters love doing that kind of stuff. But I think that it is a way, one of no, and you're funny. I mean, not the davening, not the prank. That's not being funny. But there's something knowing that it's chutzpahdik that also gives you a certain sense of agency. I can do something. I don't have to sit and stare at the walls for 55 minutes.
Way of coping. It's a way of
Yeah.
coping. So anyway, Eetta, thank you so much. Thank you, Amy. We really appreciate this. I
Thank
want to
you,
thank
Amy.
the
Thank you,
audience for
Suzanne.
joining us. Go to momentmag.com where you can register for upcoming programs. You can read articles by Eetta and Amy, and we will see everybody next time. Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.